A couple of weeks ago, as part of an explanation, you said you mentioned in passing, like I'm paraphrasing, someone, for example, in technology who is trying to develop a product, he's not a true scientist because he has a specific goal. Whereas a true scientist is looking really just to find the truth. So it kind of made me think about
to
this.
discover the laws of nature.
Thank you. So it kind of made me think about this, whether there is some kind of contradiction between trying to understand in this direction of inquiry what the ultimate reality is, but also having a kind of a sort of goal to be happy. Why necessarily does getting a better understanding of what reality actually is necessarily equal being happy? And isn't
Say that again.
why trying to understand what the absolute nature of things is, of reality is, why does that necessarily lead to happiness? What is the kind of the connection between the two? Obviously, I want to be happy, but I also kind of, when I think about it, there seems to be again a sense of trying to understand something with a specific goal in mind, which may somehow distort the
I'm going to take this question and tell me whether I understood it clearly as what is the link between discovering the truth about what we are and happiness? Is that a connection? Is that the question?
yes. I mean, certainly from a personal level, when I'm in moments where all possibilities feel more open and I feel less localized, let's say, then I do feel happier. But somehow the idea of trying to seek happiness through trying to understand the nature of reality, it seems like a certain goal-oriented inquiry, which seems somehow limited in some way. It seems.
I was trying to clarify because I was going to try to show what the connection is between the discovery and, as a result, the investigation into the nature of self, how this investigation was connected to the experience of happiness. And then you went back by saying, well, that seems to be limited. And in other words, you didn't allow me to show the connection, and right off the bat, based upon some intuition, you claim that's not sufficient, that's limited. Why? What is your rationale when you say it seems to be limited? What is your rationale for making this objection?
Well, in that you seem to be conducting an inquiry with some kind of foregone conclusion, what you want the conclusion to be.
That's not an inquiry if you have a foregone conclusion. The inquiry has to be open. In other words, the inquiry has to have its roots in not knowing. Openness means not knowing the answer. If I do an investigation, if I conduct an investigation knowing already what the outcome is going to be, that's not a real investigation. So the problem is if I conduct an investigation into the nature of self based upon the implicit or explicit assumption that I am a separate and limited consciousness, that's a foregone conclusion right off the bat. And the same thing is true if I start the investigation based upon the opposite assumption. So the investigation, that's why the investigation has to be completely open and start from the facts of our experience. But again, so you move the post again into a different direction in your answer, right? Because I was asking you first. You ask a question. I try to clarify the question by trying to prove how there was a connection between the investigation into the nature of self and happiness. You didn't allow me to do that by objecting that this approach was limited. I ask you, what do you mean by that? Be more specific about what you mean by this approach being limited. And then your answer was, it is limited because this investigation is predicated upon a foregone conclusion. I'm just if reading the transcript of the conversation, if you disagree with the transcript, it's open.
Not, I'll correct myself, not a foregone conclusion, but maybe a specific goal in mind. So I want the outcome of the investigation to lead to happiness.
Well,
and is that a problem?
Let me correct that, because you use the term a specific goal in mind, and that can be interpreted in two ways. It can be an open goal or a closed goal. An open goal meaning, what's the truth of the matter? Would you call that a specific goal?
No, that sounds more open, as you say.
Because if the goal is to prove something or to disprove something, yes. But if the goal is, if what you call a specific goal is the truth, then yes, the goal is the truth. But I wouldn't see this goal as being limiting.
So we simply equate truth with happiness?
That's a different story. Let's go step by step. Do you qualify seeking the truth as a limited goal?
No.
No. It's an open goal, right? It's
Yes.
open. There is no limitation included in this, right?
Correct.
So we agree. So now the question becomes what I was trying to, having eliminated this objection that this approach was limited, right? I go back and try to demonstrate what kind of connection there is between happiness and seeking the truth about what we are. In other words, seeking the truth about who is it who is happy, what we are, who is it who is happy or not happy. And if we as consciousness are, as most people believe to be the case, if we are a limited consciousness, in other words, in that which is our essential being, awareness, is limited and mortal, there is going to be in our life a sense of impending doom, a sense of urgency that is going to deprive us from enjoying happiness in a continuous fashion. Because our life will hinge around a constant worrying about the survival of this body, which is by essence mortal, impermanent. So a futile attempt to make permanent that which is impermanent. And as a result, we will live our life with a sense of imminent danger constantly present in the background. Also, with a frustration by having this intense feeling that we are not living our life the way we could, that we are not enjoying all the possibilities, that we are not developing the potential of this human body-mind organism to its fullest. Another way to put it is that whatever action we take, we have regrets about it. We have a total uncertainty about what to do next. Because we lack clarity, and we go for the next pleasure, knowing full well that there is going to be a price to pay down the road for this, or we will deprive ourselves from the next pleasure, hoping that we will be rewarded down the road for our sacrifice, right? So the two, but both options are not conducive to happiness. The removal, if possible, of our mortality, of the sense of impending doom, is the elimination, leads to the elimination of the fundamental worry in the background, and opens the gate for happiness or inner peace. So that, I hope I've made the case, you see, for that, and the understanding. Many people would say, oh, I don't care very much about inner peace. I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. That's fine. They are not in the right place here. They should go back to the world and seek whatever they seek, power, wealth, fame, sex, jewelry, whatever, you know. All I can speak from is my own experience. So I speak from my experience and of the discovery of this inner peace through the questioning of the nature of my reality. That's all I can say. So in my answer, I've tried to show you the connection between misery and the belief that we are a separate entity. And this connection is, once we understand that, there is something else we can understand also, is the experience of happiness. We usually attribute happiness to events or objects. But if we look closely at how it happens, happiness happens the moment the desire for the object comes to an end. Not necessarily upon the acquisition, the physical acquisition of an object, for instance, but already upon the cessation of the desire. For instance, you desire a red Ferrari as a boy, or a big diamond like that, and you are poor, but all of a sudden your relative in America who is a billionaire dies and leaves you $10 million. Instantaneously you experience happiness. Why? Because your biggest desire, the red Ferrari or the 7-carat diamond or whatever, your bigger desire, you know that now you can fulfill it. But you are not driving the Ferrari and you are not wearing the diamond yet. Right? And actually, when you start driving the Ferrari or wearing the diamond, the happiness is much less than the one that was brought about by the news of the passing away of your relative, right? Right? Which shows that the experience of happiness is not the object itself, but it is something else, which is the cessation of the desire. Now, happiness is the experience of the desireless state, as I have tried to prove it to you. Now, if we understand the mechanism of desire, we understand that most of our desire, when we are in ignorance, are the result of our belief to be a separate entity, because our desires are about protecting this body, being part of the herd, right? Being famous or feeling secure, not being ostracized, being recognized. When these desires, when the belief to be a separate entity goes away, all the desires that were dependent upon that go away. As a result, the experience of the desireless state becomes very natural. And the other desires, the ones that correspond to needs for the body, they are no longer our desires as awareness, because awareness is no longer dependent upon the body. So we disown the desire. We understand there are desires of the body, such as desire for shelter, for food, for all kinds of things. We are the manager of the body. We do our best to fulfill these desires, but ultimately they are not our desires. So we are still always desireless. We are still always desireless as awareness. The moment the connection between awareness and the body has been discriminated upon, has been separated. So that's what I could say about the connection between seeking the truth about what we are and happiness. How these two are connected and how happiness and inner peace are the natural outcome of the discovery of our true nature. And that which I mean by the discovery of our true nature has to be also clarified. It is simply the discovery that we have no evidence to be a separate consciousness or awareness. Why? Because where does the certainty that there is no evidence that we are a separate consciousness come from? It can only come, if it comes with this utmost certainty, it can only come from the experience of consciousness itself. Only from the experience of consciousness can we understand anything about consciousness. So, therefore, it is not necessary for the mind to acquire the knowledge that awareness is unlimited or that awareness is independent from the body. It is sufficient to disconnect through the experience of awareness to realize its freedom from the body. In other words, that there is no evidence that it is dependent upon the body. That's sufficient because awareness is whatever it is. The only party pooper was our belief that it was dependent upon the body. It is not like before what is called enlightenment or self-realization, awareness was dependent upon the body, and all of a sudden, through some magic switch that was switched on, all of a sudden it becomes independent. No, it has always been independent. It has always been whatever it is. So all that is required is the realization that the belief that it was dependent upon the body had no foundation in experience. And then it is whatever it is, you see.
Thank you.
I have a question about consciousness. That there's no doubt that the reality that perceives right now is conscious. The same way that there's no doubt that I perceive this table right here. But my question is about the nature of consciousness as permanent or impermanent, because it seems that just as the chair can have independent existence from any one perceiver or conscious perceiver, it seems to me that reality can also be independent from consciousness, just like time and space are an appearance to reality. It seems to, I have an intuition that so is consciousness.
You see, I agree with you absolutely. However, you have to be careful in your, because the only problem is that you and I are using a different definition of consciousness. I define consciousness as the reality which is hearing these words right now. So in your, as you began your question, you said, I agree, or I have no problem, or I understand that the reality is conscious, right? The reality is conscious. But what I call consciousness is the reality which is conscious.
But doesn't the word conscious mean to be?
It means whatever it means to you, but in our interaction, so that we talk about the same thing, in our interaction, it means the reality which is hearing these words right now, whatever this reality may be. Okay? Because I have a hint for you, perhaps what you would call consciousness would be what I would call mind or something to that effect. But what I call consciousness is the reality which is hearing these words right now, which means you, the real you.
My question is the reality always aware?
Yes. But it is either aware of objects or aware of itself. In fact, it is always aware of itself, because whatever it is aware of is nothing else than itself. But if your question means, is this reality always aware of human perceptions, for instance? We would have to define what always means, because always refers to time, which is an illusion, and human perceptions, that's clear because we have the experience of thoughts, bodily sensation. And then the answer is not necessarily. But is it always aware? Yes. Is it always aware of human perceptions? No. Because when it is aware of cats' perceptions and of dogs' perception, it is not aware of human perceptions. Or when it is aware of other people's perceptions, it is not necessarily aware of my perception if I don't have perception at that moment through this human body mind. If this human body mind is dead, for instance, it's no longer aware through this human body mind. Doesn't mean it ceases to be aware. Very important questions, very important answers.
Now, okay, I see what you're saying about it's either aware of perceptions or aware of itself. I think where I was getting
and even what we call perception
is itself, right?
Perception is a man-made concept, right? It's a
right.
because there might be other form in this infinite creativity, other forms that we couldn't call them perception because they are unfathomable to human minds. We cannot represent them. But is it always aware? Yes. Why? Because awareness and reality can never be separate. They are like two sides of the same coin. Just as happiness and reality cannot be separate, or beauty and reality, or love and reality cannot be separate. Eternity and reality, or timelessness, all of that, it's a coin with many faces. It's a coin, I would say, in the Sufi tradition, with 100 faces, which are the 100 names of God. So it's more like a diamond, right? A diamond which is cut with 100 sides, each of them representing one attribute of reality. And an attribute of reality means something that is never absent from reality. This is very important to understand. The distinction between an attribute and what we could call an accident or a modification. A modification is something of reality, would be something that is not always present. Take any form or shape or name, right? It changes constantly. So these are accidents or modifications. But an attribute of reality is always present. In other words, if you have this attribute, you have reality. But if you have reality, you always have this attribute. It is very important to understand that awareness is not an accident of reality, but is an attribute of reality. Because other than that, the fear of absolute disappearance will still remain in us. We won't enjoy our freedom. Because this awareness then potentially could disappear. Whereas no, awareness never dies. Everything that appears in awareness dies. But awareness never dies. You see, that's the liberating aspect of this discovery.
Yeah, okay. I thought of a formulation. I'm going to see if you agree with it. I think where I was stuck with the word, I was superimposing a limitation onto the word aware. I was thinking of it more self-aware in the sense of a subject-object awareness, like I as a subject am aware of myself, which creates the self as an object. But when reality is just aware of itself, it's almost unaware in the sense that it doesn't know anything other than itself, because it just is.
And because this awareness cannot be separate from it. You see, it's as eternal as reality itself. That's important to understand. And that, if you will, that is the signature of the distinction between the reality of the scientist, for instance, or the reality of most realist philosophers, and the reality of the sage. Is because science has excluded awareness from its scope of investigation. Science pretends, I mean, fundamental science. I'm talking about physics. Let's be clear, right? The mother of all science and the science in chief, right? Let's be clear about that. So let's not go into saying that sociology is a science or history, you know, that's woke culture, but that's not what we are talking about here. We are talking about real science, strong science, physics, right? So physics has excluded awareness from its scope because it has limited its scope to the study of the laws of phenomena. And that which is not a phenomenon is excluded from the scope. But then there is a kind of magician trick which is played of us. Having excluded it from the scope of science, then there is some people pretend that it doesn't exist. It's not because at the beginning of science you have limited the scope of science that which you have excluded from this scope doesn't exist, because you can try to cover the truth with how many layers as you want, but at the end there is a fact that you cannot eliminate, that there is awareness. You see, at the end the truth wins always. So science, having excluded awareness from its scope, has as a result a limited view of reality. So the reality of the scientist excludes awareness, which has been an interesting thing to do for the development of science, which is the science of phenomena. But this exclusion has created a fragmentation in reality. Right? And in a sense, science is incomplete. There is an incompleteness inherent in physics, which is the noumenal awareness. And because we have been educated in a culture, right, which is oriented towards phenomena, we pretend awareness doesn't exist. We have been taught about awareness in high school or in elementary school, whereas it's as more elementary than the counting numbers. We have been taught how to count, but nothing has been said about awareness if we think about it, right? So we have ignored completely awareness in our culture, pretending it doesn't exist. That's extraordinary. And as a result of this dichotomy between phenomenal reality and reality as a whole, we live in a culture which has ignorance of awareness, ignorance at its very foundation.
I want to go back to when you said fear of disappearance, because also I feel like this is another word that can be understood in different ways in the spiritual traditions, because in some sense it seems as if you can have the experience of disappearing or vanishing, which feels quite good. But what do you mean by disappearance? Or what's the difference?
If the experience of vanishing feels good, obviously you have not vanished. Because you are there to experience that it feels good, right?
Or
Yes, no, but that's interesting. So what is it that has vanished in the experience of vanishing that feels good? You have not vanished as the experience of the good feeling, right?
But it seems like even the good feeling is just like an aftershock. It's like good feeling would still be like something.
Yeah, yes, but that's interesting because a good feeling, if it is something, it is either thoughts or bodily sensations, right? But we may have had before, under different circumstances, similar thoughts and similar bodily sensations, but without the perfume of the good feeling. Meaning that the good feeling is more like a perfume that lingers after the beloved has left the room. So the perfume was present in the presence of the beloved, right? And the perfume is still present after he or she has left the room. In this metaphor, what does the presence of the beloved in the room mean? It means the experience of pure awareness without objects. That's the beloved. The beloved is present in the absence of objects, and it knows itself at that moment. Then when the objects appear, the world and so on, the beloved leaves the room, but its perfume remains. And the objects are present, yeah, the bodily sensation, the thoughts, they are the objects. You see. Meister Eckhart, in one of his sermons, uses this metaphor. He says, God, I don't remember, I'm paraphrasing a lot, but he says, God is kind of very jealous. He wants to be alone with you. So if there are other people or other stuff in your house, God leaves, but it remains at the door. As soon as you are empty, she enters. I think he, because he says he, I says she. So she enters, right? So that's the continuation of the metaphor of the perfume, right? God enters a room, that's nirvikalpa samadhi. That's the experience of pure awareness without objects. Then God leaves, but then the perfume lingers, objects are present. Then as soon as the object leaves, God enters again and blesses you with her grace. And it is this constant coming, entering and leaving of God, which is the experience of the sage. All we have to do is allow for her to enter once. But going back to what we were saying earlier, what is important is to be open to the possibility that reality and awareness are indissociable.
Can you expand on that? Why?
To be open to this possibility. Why? Truth, love, happiness, beauty, reality. If you try in your own experience to see these moments when you experience beauty or love or reality, you see, for instance, that there is always happiness. You see that you cannot have intelligence without love and love without intelligence. You cannot have love without beauty and beauty without love. You cannot have any of those without awareness. And you cannot have any of those without reality. You see, so you see that what I'm saying, based upon your own experience, you have no experiential facts that disprove it. On the contrary, the more you try to seek to disprove it, the more you'll say, oh no, love is and then the understanding, I cannot dissociate them. Reality and awareness, I cannot dissociate them. You see that the more you linger, the more you try to go deeper into this, how the oneness of reality in all of its attributes shines. And ultimately, you could start with any of the attributes. It's not like you have reality at the center, you see, and then you have love, and you have God, and you have all these other things. You could start from any of those and any of the attributes, because they are one. They are only various colors of the single light, which are kind of decomposed through the prism of our human experience. But in fact, they are one. That's why there are so many paths to the truth, because you can go to it through beauty, through love, through intelligence, through reality, through all these questions. In the Vedantic tradition, it's awareness.
Can you talk a little bit about the experience of the body through the vantage point of truth? Because, as you said, the perception of the mind seems to separate all the different sense doors into their individual compartments. Like we have sensations, we have emotions, we have thoughts, all the various senses. Now, is there a sort of unification of those senses into one sense door? Or is that just awareness itself?
There is such a thing as a type of thoughts which are recollections that create the experience of a human mind. Because we remember previous perceptions, right? So the recollection of these perfections, of prior thoughts, prior sense perceptions, prior bodily sensations, create a subset in the world of phenomena, if you will. But the fact that there is a subset of perceptions doesn't imply that the reality of this subset is limited by or to this subset. In other words, awareness retains the possibility to be the same in all minds. The fact that that which is perceived in awareness by awareness is limited doesn't imply or prove that the reality that perceives, aka awareness, is itself limited by or to that which it perceives.
I guess what I'm trying to transcend is the duality between God being in the room and God leaving the room.
Oh,
Because
that was a metaphor. You have to understand that. So in this metaphor, God leaving the room simply means, in fact, the opposite. It means that objects, phenomenal perceptions leave. That's the other view. That's God's view. In God, you have the mind view. The mind view, the human mind view, is when all the phenomenal perceptions leave, then there is the experience of God. But God's view is different. God's view is when the perception leaves, I experience myself. And then the perfume of myself lingers when the perception, my creation, resumes. The perfume of my unicity, if you will, is not affected by the appearance of multiplicity.
Thank you.
Any question online? Oh, there's Steve in the back.
So this feels related to that. So when I see, there's this boundary, the edge of my head, my nose. When I hear, there's limits, sensations, bodily sensation or sensations on my skin. All seem to conspire to create a sense that this I is within the body. Yet,
Wait. What's the evidence?
that's why I said seems.
Yeah, but I don't care what seems. I ask what is.
So this is where I'm going to is, it's like when I use the word I, everything seems to collapse into the body. Yet I know that that's not true.
Look, I watch a video, right?
Yes.
Okay, and this video is shot from a certain vantage point in a room,
Yep.
right? And it seems very much that I am in the room.
Yes.
Is it true?
No.
Same here. All of that is shot from a vantage point of a body being in space and time, right?
Okay.
Does it mean that you, as the perceiver,
No, it does not.
are in space and time?
It does not.
So then just stop it then. You see what I mean? Because don't come back with it seems. Ascertain for yourself what is true and what is not. What is certain and what is not certain. Now you have determined, it seems, that it is absolutely not certain that awareness is located in space and time. Have you? Or are you still certain that awareness is located in space and time?
I'm not certain.
So stay there.
Stay in the not certain and the uncertain.
Exactly. Never go back to be certain that it is located in space and time. That's all. Remain in this not knowing. I'm not asking you something beyond the realm of what is possible to you. I'm not asking you for the impossible.
So the mind goes, well, where is it? And it's like, don't even pay attention
You
to
have
that.
already reached what is possible, which is the uncertainty about where you are, whether you are in space and time or not.
Okay.
As awareness. You have reached that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can go 100 times, 1,000 times back. Now that you have reached this uncertainty, you will remain forever uncertain. You will never be able to be certain again that awareness is in space and time. That's the sad truth for ignorance. That's a good news for you. You will never, there is no coming back. Once you have reached this uncertainty, it's irreversible. No matter how deeply you think about it, no matter how far, how much you expand your investigation, the answer of this essential uncertainty, not knowing, will always come back to you, just with more clarity every time.
And so then, why do I have to keep coming back for you to tell me the same thing over and over again?
I do it. That's a stupid thing.
So as soon as I believe I's in the body, my IQ drops to 0.
All I can tell you is by now you should know better.
There's a lot of things I should know better. Thank you.